Good afternoon. Welcome to the March 20th, 2024 Technical Review Committee meeting. Meeting's now in session. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm a senior planner with Oldham County Planning and Development. The purpose of this meeting is to review proposed subdivisions, zoning map amendments, and development plans before they go to the Planning Commission. This gives local agencies and utility companies, those agencies that are represented here in front of you, the opportunity to make comments about the accessibility of services and ensure all aspects of the development plans adhere to zoning and subdivision regulations. The meeting also provides adjoining property owners and concerned citizens in attendance the opportunity to ask technical questions of the applicants or agencies represented here before you today. So we have 5 cases on the docket. All of these cases will run under the same format. So we will first ask the applicant or the representative to come forward and give a brief overview of their project. The agencies then represented in front of you will give any of their comments, and then at that point we will open the floor up for any public comment. Once again, we just ask that those questions remain technical in nature at this point of the process, either of the applicant or any of the agencies that are represented here in front of you today. And we just ask when you do come forward, you'll just state your name and address for the record slowly so that she can write it down and we can get that on record. So with that being said, we will move to the first case on the docket, and that is TRC 24-003 for Creasy Mahan Nature Preserve, the Thrive Forest School for a zoning map amendment. So applicant or representative?
Yes. Hi, my name is Tanner Nichols, here on behalf of the applicant. It's 400 West Market, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. Tanner, would you pull that up? Yeah, is that better? Yeah. There we go. Well, thank you all. Obviously, our plan here on behalf of Creasy Mahan, which is a nature preserve, and it's 160 plus acres in the Goshen area. And we are seeking a zoning change for about 1.2 acres at the center of that property. And the reason we're seeking this zoning change is for state licensing procedures and for grant writing from the state in the Commonwealth and from the state. And so Bob Vincent, is that how you say it? Bob is here. He's created the plan. I think he's had some feedback with Mr. Fisher. And we're going to update our plan with his notes, and we're here to answer questions that you may have about our proposed map amendment.
All right, I'm going to start. You said 1.2, but it's 1.65. Okay. So just to make sure everybody understands, it's not a big deal, but just for the record.
All right, so with that being said, we'll open it up for agency comments, and I will just let all the agencies know. I know there's a lot of projects on the agenda, so if we get to you and there's no comments that are needed, just stay that way. Everybody in the crowd knows that it didn't pertain to your area. So with that, I'll begin with planning and development comments, and these I already provided to Mr. Vincent as well as you, and we've already talked about most of these. But note any areas of existing trees. There were some trees there behind the property that I didn't know if those were existing or new. Note any areas of steep slope greater than 30%, and if there are none, simply place on a note on the plan stating that there's no areas of steep slope greater than 30%. The parking regulations in section 280-060 require an area designated for children drop-off and pickup that must be approved by the applicable agency. And I know me and Mr. Vincent have talked, and that's just something kind of looking at if there's going to be some sort of drop-off area, we get that noted on the plans, and we're okay with that in regards to queuing space and things of that nature. And then the site statistics do show that off-site parking is available, and I talked to Mr. Vincent about consulting section 280-130 and execute any sort of properly drawn legal agreement if there is off-site parking. Other than that, that is all I have. Mr. Silliman?
Jim Silliman, Oldham County Engineer. I just have one request on the note at the bottom. It says all buildings shown are existing. If you could just add the words and pavement so it reads all buildings and pavement shown are existing for clarity. That's it.
I don't have any comment.
I don't have anything.
It's out of my area, so I'm good.
Yep, and no comments from anybody else. I do have copies for you all of Mr. Silliman's letter as well as one more of mine. At this point, we'll open it up to anybody in the gallery that would like to speak or ask questions at this time. Is there anybody here for this case? All right, seeing none, that is it for you all. So
Thank you all.
thank you all very much. Well, he's got them. Yeah. All right, the next case on the docket is TRC 24-004, 3200 Massey School Road, subdivision in LaGrange for a preliminary subdivision. Mr. Swansburg.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Swansburg with law firm Swansburg and Smith for Miss Edgar's Purpose, 117 West Main Street, right here in LaGrange. And we are here, obviously, on behalf of DHJ Properties. I do represent DHJ Properties in this matter. They are the owners of the property that we are talking about. This is a subdivision development plan. There was in the packet, there should be a bunch of renderings, but I'm going to go ahead and bring one up here in particular just for everyone's benefit. This is a color version that should be on your screen there. This is literally the same thing that you all have seen. To the best of our knowledge, there's actually no changes other than, of course, the coloring of it so that it is visually easier to track than the black and white version on this front. 60.9 acres. Right now, the zoning is R2 and CO1, both in that area. I've got with me today both Billy Ducker, who's with DHJ Properties. He's the owner of the property, as well as Derek Triplett, who's the engineer on the property. And if you all have any specific questions, concerns, issues about that, in terms of the technical matter, they will be more than happy to come up here and address those or receive any comments on that front as well. So with that, I'm going to step down and let you all have any comments and have the engineer and the developer, if they've got any input for that, to step up and be able to answer those questions. Thank you all.
Right. Thank you. So with that, we'll begin with Brian Fogel. He's the case manager on this.
Brian Fogel, Assistant Director, Oldham County Planning and Development Services. And we'll give you copies of both my written comments and then Jim Silliman's written comments also. If you would, we'd like for you to go ahead and give us the proposed street names so we can do a check on those. I'd like to have a note added to the plat that states the minimum lot size and the average lot size. The subdivision regulations require a temporary turnaround on any stub street that accesses more than 4 lots. So that's going to impact Street A and Street B on the subdivision plat. The common property line between lots 58 and 59 is a little bit irregular. So I'd like for you guys to look at that and see if we can't square that up to where we don't give lot 58 an awkward shaped rear yard. In doing the formula and the subdivision regulations on the maximum density for an open space subdivision, I couldn't reach the same number that you guys did with the 134. So if you can just either show us your written calculations, how you arrived at 134, and if it's still not in agreement with what you're all proposing, the other alternative the subdivision regulations allow you to do is to basically generate a conventional layout and say, you know, this is the number of lots we'd be allowed if it's a conventional subdivision, and this is what we want for an open space subdivision. The last note I have would just be noting the variances and waivers. 2 of them you guys have identified on the plat. The first 2 are a request to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 35 feet to 30, a variance request to adjust the minimum side yard setback from 7 feet to 5. The other variance request would be that the way the R2 set up, it says that your 2 side yard setbacks have to equal 25, which I'm assuming is not what you guys are interested in. So we just need a variance request showing that I'm assuming you want 5 on each side for a total of 10. And then the 2 waiver requests identified were that the way the open space subdivision regulations are set up, all lots are supposed to have access to a local access street, not a sub-collector. And given the size of this subdivision, we've got everything on Street A, basically from its intersection with Street B, exceeding the classification where it's a sub-collector. And again, it's just a matter of asking for the waiver to say, with this particular layout and working with the constraints of the site, this is why we have our street network that way. And then the other waiver request is also related to the ADT. It's the subdivision regulations state that the clustered lot sections in an open space subdivision shouldn't exceed 25 for an ADT of 250. And the southernmost portion, or the rearmost portion, comes up with 31 lots. So it's just a matter, again, of not saying that it's a bad design or an improper design, just list the technicality of asking for a waiver. And again, I'll give you copies of these notes. I've also got a reduced copy with the plan marked up, and then a large one that I'm assuming I'm going to give to Derek, so he's got something that he can read and work with. That's all the planning development's comments.
Okay, from Oldham County Engineering, obviously this is going to disturb greater than 1 acre of land, so the KYR-10 from the Division of Water, that permit's required, as well as a stormwater quality management and erosion control permit from our office, which will include review of the construction plans. As you're aware, Derek, with the review of the construction plans, the roads that are shown preliminary right now, the geometry of those roads should be in accordance with our current regulations. Based on our review of the USGS information online, it appears that there are several blue line streams on the property. So any impact to those, which could be, I think you show some utilizing some existing ponds for in-stream detention potentially. Any impact to those jurisdictional waters would require appropriate permitting or correspondence with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Division of Water. Future plans should indicate that there's no access directly to Zalesmith Road or Massey School Road from the lots. You know, on the plan they're shown offset, but just for perpetuity, we'd want that note on the record plat and on the plans. I mentioned the blue line streams. You should indicate those on the plans. Any stormwater conveyances outside the right-of-way and detention basins should be included in a drainage easement, and that would be recorded before we would release the erosion control permit associated, or erosion control surety associated with that permit. Two of the streets are shown with stub roads. In accordance with our subdivision regulations, when there's more than 4 lots, those need to have at least a temporary turnaround. So temporary turnaround or permanent provided. Brian, I don't know if you mentioned the centralized mailbox units needing to be in accordance with USPS regulations. Okay. On the red line that Brian will give you that we have, there were a couple, or I'll say 3 or 4 catch basins. You might want to consider relocating on an opposite side of the street just to, with consideration to stormwater flow across an intersection or gutter spread. It shouldn't increase any number of catch basins or length of pipe. It's just moving them to the other side of the street. And then lastly, based on the number of lots, based on ITE calculations, this would generate 132.66 PM peak hour trips. That's more than the 100 that's required for a traffic impact study. However, we don't have traffic counts on Massey School Road, so I'd ask that LD&D just provide, if Massey School Road doesn't have a sufficient number of trips to trigger that other criteria for a traffic impact study, that you provide that for our concurrence. We would accept if you want to get street light data from KIPTA, that's acceptable, as opposed to actual tube counters. It'd be easier and sufficient. So that was it.
As far as me just getting with me with the, the addresses, and for the open space lots, I don't see the break in between open space 1002 and 3, or 4 and 5, or 6 and 7, 1007. There's no break in those open space lots, but they have different acreages. And is there anything that's going to be out in there? I'm going to have to know for like utilities, if you're going to potentially put like a gazebo potentially, if there's any kind of water meters, if there's any sprinklers of any kind. signs, lights out in the front of the subdivision, I'm gonna need to know so I can put place markers for those, for address points for all those utilities. Those are my only comments.
Mr. Williams?
So based on the 134 units, that would impact the district with 21 students over its build-out. The serving schools would be Locust Grove, Oldham County Middle School, and Oldham County High School. When you calculate in the other already approved developments in the campus area, it brings the total capacity up to 108.87% of capacity, which technically is inadequate, but based on our agreement with the county for the capacity multiplier would get you 25 units per year.
Okay, as far as water and sewer utilities, we do have water available at Maple Drive. It'll have to be extended from there. There will need to be extension agreements for water and sewer. Sewer is limited. It's going to have to be a pump station. We've really got two options, and so we'll get into that when you get into design. But there are two options to pump to. Let's see, and as with, and all of you all have worked with us in the past, so when projects are going, we'll have an inspector on site that you will be responsible as the developer to pay those fees. So that's pretty much it from us.
Keith Smith, LaGrange Fire and Rescue Department. The usual stuff will be placing hydrants, locations, and all that. I do want to make a note, though, and this has got more to do with PVA than with this group, but there's actually 2 fire districts located here. Somewhere around lot 56, 57, there's a line there that breaks and going towards Blakemore, that's actually Ballardsville's district. All the rest of it is LaGrange. However, when you look at PVA, it's all down under District 20, I think is what that definition is. So it says City of LaGrange, Ballardsville for the whole thing. That's incorrect. So I don't know what changes need to happen there or whatever.
Do you all kind of trade districts so that's only one? Or?
Well, I kind of wish that, maybe a representative from Ballardsville, I don't know if Chief had an opportunity to chat with them or not. Money-wise, I think the rate's the same, but, still, I think I counted 31 lots from that point around. And those 31 lots from an old division, I forget what year it was, maybe in 2000s, early 2000s, there was a negotiation between the two departments. And that line, best I can kind of eyeball it, is somewhere right in there. So, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why it would be like that because, there's not going to be any entry from Blakemore, so, they're going to have to come in off of Zale Smith and down.
Yeah, but that's essentially an interagency agreement that's not necessarily related. You'll provide fire protection, somebody will.
Yeah, there'll be
is-
fire protection there. If anything, we work very well with Ballardsville and have mutual aid agreements. So if there's a structure fire anywhere in here, you're going to get both Ballardsville and LaGrange. So I was just bringing that point out for the PVA side of it.
Did Chief Fonte even get? Yeah.
No.
So he isn't here because he probably wasn't even notified.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we'll
he may
make
not.
sure that he gets notified.
Okay, all righty. That's all I had to comment on.
All right, thank you.
Can I go back to Scott? Is there adequate water supply for fire suppression? You've done a hydraulic analysis.
When we get into that a little bit more, we'll run that through our hydraulic model once we know how we're going to run it there. But there's a 12-inch coming from our Zale Smith tanks. I'm certain we're very well prepared at that point.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody from your team need to respond to anything that you all heard so far? All right. All right, so at this point, we'll open it up for public comment. If anybody would care to speak, we just ask that you come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. So just raise your hand, and I'll figure out who wants to be for a little start here. We'll go to you next.
Donald Adams, 2401 Massey School Road. My question is to you, Mr. Silliman, about the traffic count on Massey School Road. You said about taking the past traffic count. Is that my understanding of it?
Right, so for the criteria for requiring a traffic impact study is that the development generate greater than 100 peak hour trips, which it does, but it also says that that road needs to generate more than, I believe it's 2,000 ADT. I don't have counts on, or we don't have counts on that road, so if they're below 2,000, then
Yeah.
technically it doesn't hit both those criteria and wouldn't require a traffic impact study. So we're just asking them to get that data.
Yeah.
We'll check it on our side to
Yeah.
see if we concur and go from there.
Well, my point is, I would like to see an actual traffic count since the Summit subdivision that's been built back there, the traffic on the road has increased enormously. So,
Well, it's interesting. If you look at there's traffic counts on 53 and there's traffic counts on Jericho Road on either side of Massey School, right?
yeah.
Of course, 53 is well over 2,000. Jericho was below 2,000, so I'm interested to see what's actually between. And
Okay.
we just need that count.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, hold on. We'll go right here. I'll get you next, sir. No, you're fine.
My name is Judith Gunn at 3109 Blakemore Lane, and I'm one of the adjoining property owners. And my question is, when they put the subdivision in, will there be like a fence or something around my property and the subdivision where I won't have people coming over into my property?
We'll let them answer that.
Huh?
We'll let them answer that.
Billy Delker, 4751 Fox Run Road, Buckner, Kentucky, 40010. So at this point, we kind of talked about this a little bit at the neighborhood meeting. We're early enough into the process where we haven't made that determination. At this point, I don't think we're thinking that we'd put an entire fence all the way around, but I think once we get further into the development plan, there might be, some landscape buffering and things like that.
Okay. Another question, your drawing
Just
also
come
did
close to the
not show
mic
where-
for me, please. Just come up to the mic
Oh.
for me. Thank you.
You didn't really show where your pump station was going to be at. Do you have any idea on your map that you showed up there?
Oh, boy.
Okay, well,
She got it.
Yeah. That password is on the keyboard if you want to type it in.
Oh.
It just logged out.
I think so. There we go. Okay, so we do represent the pump station on the plan here, and that's down here in this corner.
so, okay, so that's not going to affect me. then,
Right, your-
'Cause
your
I'm up
property is over here.
And then over here,
That's right.
those two places. Okay, have y'all taken into account also about any kind of water drainage coming into our properties and stuff?
Yeah, so we will not be able to increase any runoff onto your property. We have a series of detention basins located throughout the development, and we locate those in the existing drainage courses of the property. And what those do is those hold back the additional runoff that's generated by the added impervious surface on site. And that extra water is held back by these detention basins and then released at a rate that is slower than or equal to the rate in which water leaves the site today. And so those outfall points into your property will have the same rate of runoff as it does today or lessened.
So I won't get any at all, you're saying?
You have
I
a,
have this right here and this up here.
right, so there is a drainage course running along this draw here that goes into your property. And we are locating a proposed detention basin in line with that drainage course to hold back that extra impervious surface and that extra runoff.
Okay. So this, where you just pointed out where your pump station is,
Yes.
if I ever wanted to tie into the sewer, is that where I could tie into, or?
So that would be a bigger conversation with LaGrange Utilities.
Because right now, where I'm at, I have 60 acres there, and I don't have any sewer there. If I
Okay.
ever want to, I didn't know whether,
So we are proposing sanitary sewers within these public rights-of-way, one of which would be stubbing into your property. And so technically, you would have access to that sanitary stub within that public right-of-way because it touches your site within public property that would be the roadway.
so I
Question
wouldn't
would
be able
be
to tie in there
elevations.
if I ever,
Theoretically, the question would be whether or not you could get gravity connection to that point from your property.
okay, that would be something I would have to have somebody come in and evaluate and do
That's-
that testing and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right, and again, it's dependent on the topography of your ground and how it relates to the proposed sanitary stub that would be within that public right-of-way,
Okay.
and how that elevation of the proposed sewer relates to your topography, because you would want to get gravity connection to that sewer if possible.
Another question. If I ever want to sell my property, is there any way, I mean, there's no way another subdivision could tie into that one point?
So the reason that we provide these stubs into properties, large properties with development potential is for that purpose. Should you want to sell your property to a developer and they wanted to extend a public road into their site, they would have the ability to do so based on the stub that we're providing into your property.
But how would it affect like sewers and stuff like that? I mean, for a subdivision, right now, that's probably based on, all these 134 houses is based on that one pump station, correct?
Right, so there would be potential upsizing of sewers within the site and to that pump station to account for potential flow coming from your property. It's all, it's hard to really guess at this point without much more direction on what your flow and your yield would be on that, but that would be all part of this process that you would go through at that point.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yes,
Answer my
ma'am.
questions.
Thank you. Go right here, sir.
My name is Jack Lockery, and I live on Zell Smith Road. I've got some questions, two technical questions. The first one has to do with traffic. And this is a gentleman here said that the traffic study only has to, reach a threshold of, 2,000 trips. Dogwood Estates.
Well, let me correct that. It's 2,000 trips on the existing road. The ADTs of an existing road, so Zale Smith.
Now, that does include Zell Smith, or not?
Well, yes, because it's coming out to Zale Smith Road.
I may have said Massey School because
the name of the Yes. Right.
That's what.
I may have said Massey School because of the name of the subdivision, but it's at the connecting point. You're correct. It's labeled Zale Smith. So
Okay.
that's what they're going to provide the data for.
So that they will be providing a traffic study?
Only if the traffic at that point is 2,000 or greater.
Okay. You all know that Zale Smith Road is the Henry County bypass. And I have a copy of a study that the Dogwood Estates original version did back in 2013. And they projected an increase on Zale Smith Road of 100% within 4 years. And so now we're up to 2024. I don't know if any of you have driven on Zale Smith Road in the last, couple of years. It is increasingly, deteriorating, that the edges are, collapsing. It gets a lot of traffic. And I did note that this old, traffic study described Zale Smith Road as a 2-lane road with 9-foot lanes and 1-foot shoulders on each side. Now, I urge any of you to go out there and to show me where there's a 1-foot shoulder on Zale Smith Road. There is not. And so that a question which I've got for you folks is that, is there going to be any, say, consideration for the condition of Zale Smith Road, say, going forward, and the impact which you stated, I think, was 136 additional trips, I guess.
Peak hour
hours?
trips. Mhm.
Correct. And, but that is a real, say, concern which we have got from a, say, technical standpoint is Zale Smith Road has experienced a lot of increased, say, traffic, especially from Henry County. And I think Henry County, that they represent over half of the volume on that street. So I would urge any, say, projections to take into consideration what, say, development or what traffic might be coming from Henry County. And the other, say, technical, so you use that term in quotes, issue I've got is the existence of the sewer. The impact of the sewer on where we live, say currently that surrounding area has got 1 house per 3 acres. If this, say, development did not have sewers, it would have to adhere to the zoning of 1 house per acre. So the advent of this sewer, say, coming into this, say, development is absolutely critical, and it has a tremendous impact in terms of the density and the nature of this, say, development, if it did not have that sewer. So we are, say, talking here, say, currently 1 house per, say, 3 acres, to a 900% increase in, say, density across the street, because that we're talking 3 houses to 4 houses per acre. And that's one hell of an increase for right across our street. So I would like to get back to this sewer. Who owns it? Who owns this sewer? Because this came upon, am I not say correct, that the city of LaGrange annexed Zale Smith Road. Now, when that annexation happened, did it include that the residents who live on Zale Smith Road are now LaGrange citizens? Can anybody answer that question?
I can answer as far as the sewer goes. The sewers belong to LaGrange Utilities Commission. And so the property in question is within the city limits of LaGrange,
Okay.
which requires sewers to be put into the development. There's no option to not sewer if it's inside the city limits. Now, now that annexation, I'm not certain how it gets there from, because I think it may just follow the Zale Smith Road and not incorporate some of the properties in that area, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Because my question here is the legitimacy. Who authorized that sewer to go in? Are the people on Zale Smith Road, where I live, am I a resident of LaGrange? Do I have a right to vote? I have never, say, voted in a LaGrange election. So I've got some questions. Who authorized this, the legitimacy of it, and because we are, say, facing it is extremely consequential, and how it's going to impact us. So I would say this is a, say, technical, say, question, and was one that we residents on Zale Smith would like answered.
I'm trying to pull up on my cell phone the map that shows where the city limits are. So to answer your question about whether you're a resident of the city, I don't believe you are. because I don't think your property was annexed into the city, so that would make you a resident of the county, I think. But I can't pull it up on my cell phone, so I
Because
can't
if I
answer.
live on Zale Smith Road,
Right.
and it's been annexed, does that not by definition, because I've got, say, frontage and I say live on Zale Smith Road, does that not make me a, say, resident of LaGrange?
The easiest way to answer that, again, is let's go downstairs after this meeting, if you got time, and we can look on the computer and look where the city limits are. I don't believe you're annexed, because you would know that. You would be paying city taxes if you are actually in the city limits based on that annexation. I don't know where that line is. I can't answer you any further than that, but if you got time, we can go look on the map downstairs.
Okay, because that is a fundamental issue here, is that sewer. And you stated that this, say, development would not be able to happen without a sewer.
Because it's in the city limits of LaGrange.
Now, has it already been, has that property, that is in LaGrange, correct?
Yes.
Now, say, could it not be, say, developed, which I doubt our, say, friends here would have an interest in, say, developing it if it was one house per acre? And I'm just, say, curious, it would not be allowed, such a, say, development like that would not be allowed if a, say, developer had an interest in doing that?
Right, not as long as, if it's within the city limits, it is required to be sewered.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I see. I guess that is the only two, say, technical, say, questions which I have had at this point. Then I would be interested, Jim, just to get, say, confirmation as far as the details of that annexation and.
We're trying to get it on, it just won't come up, so that we have to be downstairs on the computer.
Okay.
And sir, before you sit down, can you just give us your numbers on Zale Smith? I know you said you live on Zale Smith, but we just need your
2313,
2313?
That's correct.
And then if you could spell your last name for us.
Lockery.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
This is somewhat related to your question. You had asked about the condition of Zale Smith Road, and this goes back to the city versus the county portion, because years ago when we were determining the actual city and county rights of way, even though a portion of the adjoining properties along Zale Smith Road, most of it's county, some of it is city, especially in this area. So when you go check that map downstairs, you may find out that you are county, not city. It's sporadic as far as that. So we determined that the road itself, we agreed with the city of LaGrange that the road will be county maintained. As such, we actually are, before the end of this fiscal year, we will be patching and repaving Zale Smith Road. So to answer your question about the condition of Zale Smith Road, the county is actively, over the next couple of months, we have a contract with a paver to resurface, and we'll patch any base failures before we do that.
Is there a specification, a standard for a county road as far as 9-foot lanes and 1-foot shoulders?
There are width specifications. Some of the roads, though, were built prior to that. So there are numerous roads throughout the county, miles and miles of roads that don't meet our current standards.
Okay.
Thank you. You got a follow-up?
Where will you tie in?
Just wait till you come up to the microphone for us. Thank
Where
you.
will you tie in for the new sewer? Where would the new connection be, where you will extend it down to the new subdivision? Is it, oh, I'm sorry.
I can tell you. So there is an existing force main at Maple Road. Right now, the plan is to redirect that force main up Zale Smith Road to a gravity sewer that would gravity down to the pump station we're providing. At that point, it'd be pumped back up to Zale Smith and reconnect to that existing force main at Maple Drive and Zale Smith.
Will there have to be changes and modifications to be able to accommodate 134? I'm just asking questions for future.
Changes and modifications
To that Maple,
No, we'll be essentially redirecting the flow of that force main to the frontage of the proposed site.
Will you be
and then
teeing into it? Is that what you're saying? Adding a new pipe?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll be doing that and just running it down to gravity fed down to your,
Yes, ma'am, and then pumping it back up and then tying back into that same force main.
okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that has any questions that are, yes?
I have a question for whoever.
You just need your name and address for the record.
I'm sorry. Sharon Adams, 2401 Massey School Road. I have a question about I'm not sure what this means. Technicality of asking for a waiver. What does that have? How does that work?
The subdivision regulations for all residential subdivisions allow an applicant to ask for a waiver from any of the requirements in the subdivision regulations. Now, you can't just ask for it and it's granted. The applicants have to demonstrate that, there is a justification for that waiver.
Okay. And I have a question for Mr. Silliman. You said that you guys are working on Massey School, Zale Smith. Twice in the past year, and I think earlier this year, we've seen someone out marking holes. Well, 6 months passed, nothing happened. They marked them again, nothing's happened. Isn't this a terrific waste of time and money to do this and nothing happens?
No, we have a road inspector, and what he's doing is we've marked those areas. They're base failures in the pavement. So when our contractor can come by and do the work, now they have a specified amount of time, and that inspector is just going through and we'll say freshening up the paint. So when the contractor's ready, it's ready for him to do the work.
And Jim, didn't you have to do that in order to get bids?
Correct. It's so we can get the most competitive bids. If we just told a contractor we want 10 patches done, they don't know where those are and they can't give us a good price. So by showing them those areas specifically, they know exactly what work they have to do and they can give us the most competitive price. So actually it's a benefit to us as a county to do that.
Okay.
And they do have to, the contract is for this work to be completed before the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So sometime before June 30th, they have, that's their cutoff date.
Okay. The other thing for you guys, it's the environmental impact of this subdivision. As our neighbor said, there are not many houses out there, and this is just going to be a big cluster of houses. We already have that on Highway 53 with that one subdivision that was built on a former whatever. And an environmental problem we have there, water is pouring down from that subdivision onto Zale Smith when we get a heavy rain. And you guys indicated, oh, it's a once in 100 years. No, it's pretty much annually, if not quarterly, that we get a rain like that and everything just washes down. It's flooding, and I don't know who's responsible for that. But I would really hate to see that happen at the corner of Massey School and Zale Smith because water does stand there because there's underground streams that come through there. It's a big environmental impact there. That I'm concerned about with water, but also the lighting in the subdivision. That's a lot of lights. Nightly deer, we have a herd of deer that come through there. There's wild turkeys, there's all kinds of animals. Those are going to have to find a home somewhere. And I've noticed in Oldham County, we just seem to be concerned about building on every square inch we have. So I was just concerned about low-level lighting instead of these huge glaring spotlights everywhere in this one area that will look like Vegas or something.
I think if I'm not mistaken, this was one of the topics that you had brought up at our neighborhood meeting, maybe. So I guess two things to point out. One, we're aware of what the surroundings are there, and this is part of why we're trying to propose a conservation subdivision. So, we're proposing 134 houses, but we're keeping 30 acres of open space. So, so I understand what you're saying. It's an open field now. Clearly, houses are going to make the make it look different, but we're trying to do something that we feel like is a need and would fit into the area appropriately. It's hard to look at it on a map, but there, when you look at think of a 60-acre field and 30 acres of it's going to be left open, it's pretty significant compared to what most subdivisions are.
You'll need to, if you're going to speak, you need to come back to the microphone, please.
The 30 acres that are left open, does that include the sidewalks, the roads, what does 30 acres is not just grass and trees?
So the 30 acres that Billy is referencing is all taking place within open space lots. You cannot count anything within a public right-of-way or anything encumbered by anything other than an open space towards those numbers. So no, everything that we're counting as open space would essentially need to stay in its current condition.
So essentially, everything that's green on this map that's up there is part of that 30-acre open space.
That's right.
So what we're attempting to do is propose a development plan that meets the current zoning requirements. As Brian pointed out, we're asking for some waivers and some variances because of that proposal for the conservation subdivision, partly. But then also on the lighting, I think that's still a to-be-determined type of scenario. There are various types of low-level lighting that, can be accomplished. Because we have that mass amount of conservation area, I think that's the part. And I'm not even sure how this is going to work, and Scott necessarily can't answer this question, I don't think, on the lighting side, but with it being in the city of LaGrange, we've got to work with LaGrange to make sure that we're meeting whatever the requirements are for street lighting, but I don't know if that means it has to include every bit of the open space, or if we can focus some of those more in the housing areas. Part of what we're doing, one of the waivers is the sidewalk. We don't want to run 2 layers of sidewalks all the way around all those conservation areas. So we're going to try to run them on one side and then have some crossings in the roads to limit some of the concrete areas and that kind of thing to try to preserve more of that natural feel for the neighborhood.
Thank you. Back here in the rear.
I'm Elaine Stringer, 2401 Zale Smith Road. My biggest concern with the streets, and I guess that goes to you, we used to have white stripes on the edges of the road. They're completely gone. Now, many of us are older and retired, and our eyesight isn't quite as good as it used to be. So at night when we're driving home, we get blinded. I've had to stop, let a car get past me, and go on because I can't see the edge of the road. I was taught in driver's ed, when you've got headlights hitting you in the eyes, you look to the white side and you keep going. I can't do that. Are there going to be white stripes put down on Zale Smith Road?
I don't believe so. And if you were to, I'm not aware of the current pavement markings being there.
They're
maybe
there.
They're old and
you
they're
have
faded.
to look for them under the grass.
So, typically the criteria or the warrants for striping are based on traffic. We've talked about the current traffic volumes on that road. If we look to the manual uniform traffic control devices, there are numbers that say if there's more than 3,000, less than 5,000. We typically base that on that. I mentioned the amount of roadways we've got in the county earlier. We've got 350, 360 100 miles of roads in the county. Most of those don't have striping because of the low volume nature of those roads. If you'd like to, we can look into it and
we
verify that.
had them there when they repaved it 25 years ago. And they were nice. You could see the edge of the road at night. And also, there's one sign that says 35 miles an hour. Nobody pays any attention to it unless we live there. I got on the road the other day, went around that first curve, got passed by a pickup truck because I was doing 35. We need more speed limit signs and no passing signs.
Well, the speed limit, you said there's one there and people aren't paying attention to it. That's the problem. That's an enforcement issue, and the chief of police is aware of it. If you've got one and they're ignoring it, I don't know why another speed limit's going to help sign. We can check on the striping.
It's a small sign. It's not even that large.
But I think
they used to have speed things on there and whatever, but of course the more people you get, the more people you have going too fast. But yeah, I'd really like to see white stripes on that road again.
Well, I'll tell you, if I could get your contact information either after the meeting, so we can look into that and then convey our results to you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
In that same vein, in terms of the stripes, the other, say, developer, which, say, for lack of a better term, for Dogwood Estates 1, they had been asked to, if they were going to go ahead with their development, to put a stripe down the middle of the road, and which would help residents negotiate that street once again, which is extremely narrow for the traffic and your, say, folks who will be redoing it. They're well aware that the edges are, say, collapsing. But we happened to chat about this, that the feasibility of it, having a stripe put down the center of Zale Smith to enhance the ability of residents and whomever is, say, driving on there to negotiate that road.
Right. And Jim kind of answered that based on the width of the road and the requirements in the MUT. Yep.
And does it meet that requirement or not as far as?
So my initial thought is no, it probably does not. And that's why we're likely not planning on putting the stripes back down with our current paving. But as I said to the lady who was just here speaking, I'll double check those numbers and see if it qualifies and convey those results to and I can send it to both of you if you'd like.
Yeah, because my neighbor mentioned stripes on the side,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know if one in the middle as well would.
Well, that's kind of an interesting discussion that we've had, and you might see on some of the state roads that are striped, they only have the white edge lines, and they feel that that's sufficient. You know, our discussions with the state is they put just those white edge lines and feel that oncoming traffic is enough to signify you to move over, so they don't add the yellow center lines. Other people feel that the center line's more important because of opposing traffic. But that tends to push you off the edge, right, if you're obeying that center line. So there are multiple schools of thought. We're going to look at them and base it on the conditions of the road. And again, I'll convey that to you.
And one more thing. You said that Zale Smith will be repaved?
Yes.
And that is to be completed when? June?
So again, the contract deadline is June 30th because that's the end of our fiscal year, and it's a contract in this fiscal year. It'll likely be done before that. I think it'll be done well before that, but it will be done by that time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
This is about Zell Smith again. When they built the subdivision on 53, where the Achenbach Farm was at one time, they were supposed to, the curve on Zell Smith, that was supposed to have been redone, and it has never been redone.
Well, that was the old plan. The plan that got approved.
Yeah.
The only requirement was that they stub to the neighboring property because they didn't meet the threshold that Mr. Silliman was talking about earlier. And the way that it was going to be redone, it didn't go across, it involved the easement for the water tank, and there's a cell tower over there. And so the current development, as it was approved, was not required to access Zale Smith Road. So in a way that helped Zale Smith Road, because we understood that there would be potentially more traffic even on that segment, which is much closer to 53, but still adds traffic. So at this point, unless there's another subdivision built where they attach to it, they won't access Zale Smith.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else? All right, with that being said, so if you received notice of today's meeting for this particular project, if they go forward and go to the Planning Commission, you will be notified again of that hearing date and time. So with that, we'll close that case and we will move to the next one. TRC 24-005 Buckner Crossing, Track 3 at Commerce Parkway. With that being said, we'll have the applicant come forward.
Stuart Frankenthal, 707 Skokie Boulevard, Suite 405, Northbrook, Illinois, 60062. This is part of a PUD. I think you all know this is part of where Kroger has been developed. McDonald's is on lot number 2. This is track number 3. I'm here to answer any questions, but I will turn it over to Camille because she's really the one who has any knowledge. It's her plan. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Stuart. My name is Camille Hessen. I'm with Heritage Engineering, 642 South 4th Street in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's see. And again, we are here today to discuss Tract 3 of the Buckner Crossings development. It is a PUD. And this is a snip showing our site plan on within that development. And the Tract 3 has two components, the Tract 3A and Tract 3B. Tract 3A is about 0.61 acres. Tract 3B is 0.58 acres. And the uses for Tract 3A and 3B would be 3A being a proposed bank and 3B being a proposed coffee shop. And there would be 37 parking spaces shared between those two uses as well. And then this is just a diagram showing Tract 3 in relation to the rest of the Buckner Crossing development on this portion of the site. And where water is draining, sorry, from our site, you can see it's draining through, connecting through to the Kroger, and then draining through over to the detention basin located at the, I think it's a southwest portion of the site. And we're here today to answer any questions you guys may have.
All right, Mr. Fogel.
All right. Brian Fogel, Assistant Director, Oldham County Planning Development Services. Really just technical comments that I think are updating the plan, and we should be able to keep you all on the timetable being before the Planning Commission at their April meeting. And in fact, one of them on your drawing you've addressed. So I think it's easy fixes. What was submitted with the TRC application has a title block that says Kroger L794 Buckner Grocery and Fuel Center. We just needed updated to reflect bank and coffee shop. The parking summary, it looks like in just cutting and pasting the details, one of the lines got pulled down, and we just need you to correct that to show the parking summary at the bottom with the combined parking with tracks 3A and 3B. Again, I suspect that's an easy fix. The right-of-way dimension for Commerce Parkway, it needs to be provided. We need the bearings and distances for the lot lines, including the proposed division of Track 3 into Track 3A and 3B. The building setbacks need to be shown from the Commerce Parkway right-of-way. Again, it's a requirement in the site plan review checklist. One of your slides addressed this. We just need you to note the stormwater flow and stormwater management provisions. We don't have lot coverage calculations or figure on the site plan, if you can give that to us. And then just a couple general comments, and you guys have submitted part of that already. We need a site plan, landscaping plan, and lighting plan for the Planning Commission's consideration. And in here, I've just got what they're accustomed to seeing in terms of building elevations and dumpster enclosures and landscaping. And I've got that listed in the letter that we'll give you a copy of. And the only waiver that I noticed in reviewing what y'all have submitted so far is that it shows that Track 3A shows a total of 19 parking spaces, which exceeds the maximum parking spaces for that individual lot. But I recognize what you're all doing is there's some sharing of parking, but technically you need to ask for the waiver and then explain that in asking for the waiver from the Planning Commission, the dynamics between the two sites and how you're not exceeding the overall parking. Again, just a
Do we need, Brian, do we need to submit we're going to be doing a reciprocal easement agreement?
Yes.
With them? So you would like that for the planning commission? It'll be in draft form, because again, you'll be in draft form, but we will provide that for the planning commission with the reciprocal easement agreement in the shared parking
Yes,
scenario.
and I think that's your justification for the waiver, Stuart. And again, even just the intent that you'll do that and that you'll bind yourself to that requirement, I think is probably what the Planning Commission is accustomed to seeing.
You are actually going to do a minor plat separating
Yes,
these
we are.
lots.
But we're not, but we were told is that we should come to this meeting, get the approval at the planning commission, and then submit and we're going to have it surveyed, right? When's it going to be done? Scott, do we know? The field work is already done, so we can supply that to the planning commission, but we don't want to do that separation until it's approved.
Right.
The thought process is to do the planning commission and then
To get approval for
get
both
approval
sites, right.
for both sites, and then do that.
Right.
But we've already done the survey work to do that. We don't want to do the legal documents until we believe we have to get the county judge's approval on doing that separation, correct? Is that what you told me? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get that to you. Once we have planning commission approval, then we would do that. But we're prepared to do that, and we'll have reciprocal easement agreement. So I guess the question is, do we need the waiver, or does the reciprocal easement agreement take care of the waiver?
Well, I guess we always think of potential eventualities where something may not pan out. So let's say that, because you're on different timelines, that the tract for the bank happens because they're on a quicker timeline. And that if for some reason the coffee shop doesn't happen, we'd prefer to go ahead and have that technicality addressed by the planning commission to say, yes, they granted a waiver, recognizing that maybe the coffee shop doesn't happen.
And in the event that one of those changes hands, changes brand, when they do title search, they're always looking for, wait a minute, we don't have enough. That's already part of this, and
Fine.
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay.
Great.
So the waiver is a certificate of land use restriction thing. The reciprocal parking is part of that, deeded in the property or however you do it, or the lease, and on and on, so.
Yep, and and again, we'll give you hard copies of those comments and Jim Silliman's copies at the conclusion of this.
Okay. That's very helpful.
All right, some of ours, so when I looked at the areas that were noted on the plans, I think one was like 0.68 and one was 0.51 acres, so it's real close to an acre. If your land disturbance is under an acre, technically there's not a stormwater quality permit required. However, we do still review the plans. That would also apply to the KYR 10 Division of Water permit. If it's actually less than an acre of disturbed area, that would not be required. So just confirm that. Again, either way, we're going to be reviewing the plans. Also associated with that, and it's really irrelevant typically with the stormwater quality permit and the disturbance over an acre, we would require the detention or stormwater calculations. However, that's already been addressed with the Kroger and the McDonald's site. So even if you require that permit, the detention calcs are not required because that's already taken care of. Some just minor drafting issues we observed. There's a pipe, I think it was from a previous design, crossing the signalized entrance. It's currently shown out in the pavement prior to the right turn lanes being added. The reference to MSD Private Development Review Office should be changed to Oldham County Engineering. The title block currently shows Kroger Fuel Center. The FEMA mapping information, I think there's a updated map to reference in the notes. So if you could also add a pavement section detail for your next submittal for Planning Commission. The curbs weren't apparent. I think maybe they're just shown as a bold line now, so if you could identify where the curbs around the perimeter of the parking are. Of course, that's required by the subdivision regulations. Just ensure the internal geometry can accommodate the vehicles that you plan to have there, delivery vehicles, emergency vehicles. I talked about the stormwater detention not being required. And then lastly, we had talked at previous meetings about the requirement for an update to the most recent traffic impact study. Of course, as we discussed before this meeting, your traffic engineer provided that yesterday. So between now and a couple weeks before the Planning Commission, we'll have a chance to review that and see if we have any questions.
We did submit a development plan too recently, and I believe.
Speak into the microphone.
We did submit a development plan recently, and I believe that some of the comments have been addressed on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know you emailed me to confirm that it had been dropped off and
Yes.
it's in a pile on my desk. And I haven't done a completeness review, but
I understand.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't have any comments. After it gets approved, or even after the plat, we can address it. They will both have Commerce Parkway addresses, though.
Yes.
Just so you know.
This is not in my area, so.
Okay.
I'm familiar with the property and all that, so LaGrange, it'll be under our protection district, but I have no comments. Everything's there that I need.
I'll bring. Hey, and I just want to bring to your all's attention, in case you did not get a copy of it, we did receive the downstream facilities capacity letter from MSD. Have you all received that too?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
All right.
We did receive it, and there was confusion, and that's why I raised the question.
But
It had to do with the issues that they had. That one side didn't know that the other side had granted that, and we were all part of that
Right.
whole discussion that Louisville Paving had to provide the
Okay.
bond in the final scenario. So it's all been done.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody here that would has any questions for the applicant or agencies represented regarding this case? All right, with that being said, that'll conclude this one. We will roll right along to the next one, TRC 24-006 for Todd's Place Car Wash at 816 South First Avenue in LaGrange. The applicant.
Good afternoon. Alex Rosenberg, Al Engineering, 13,000 Middletown Industrial Boulevard, Suite A, Louisville, 40223. So basically, this is an exciting reuse of the old Ponderosa site. And we think it fits with the area and will be a nice improvement to the vacant lot that is there. And we look forward to your comments.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fogel.
Brian Fogel, Assistant Director, Oldham County Planning Development Services. I have very brief comments because I know you guys are pretty far along in this process, simply because this is a site plan that's not required to go before the Planning Commission for a public hearing in terms of its complexity level. So a lot of the issues have been addressed. My only comment in reviewing what you've submitted so far is that we need a site plan, landscaping and lighting plan, application and documents submitted for us to review and give staff approval. And Alex, I know from the emails that we've exchanged, you're well on the way of getting that prepared. So, and I will give you a hard copy of the simple letter and then also a hard copy of Jim's comments also.
So as Brian mentioned, the design on this is kind of, we'll say, ahead of schedule, and so we've reviewed your plans at a more complete level. As such, you've got those review comments. I do want to go over some of those comments just for the record. One was with regard to the potential need for a traffic impact study or traffic assessment. We've talked about that a lot today. In this case, the new use of the property does generate enough traffic that would typically warrant the traffic assessment. However, you mentioned the words reuse. We also understand that this is a reuse of an existing site. So when you look at the difference in the trips generated, it would not require that. The difference is less than that criteria. Also, we observed that the exit 20 ramps at Ernie Harris Parkway are being constructed, and we really think that a lot of the traffic from Rawlings and other businesses are going to be redirected. Instead of coming out at 53 on Moody Lane, they'll start using exit 20. So really, we should see a reduction in traffic in that area. Given those considerations, as we discussed, we were not requiring the traffic assessment. I don't think it would. I think we all agree it wouldn't provide us any useful data for this development. So just to explain that. We'll say similarly with the stormwater quality management and erosion control permit we discussed, or the KYR 10 permit, your site is just under an acre, but also not only is it just under that threshold, it's a reuse of an existing site. So as such, we're not requiring those permits, but again, like we said earlier, we do review the plans as we're doing. So we will review those plans. This property does encroach onto City of LaGrange Road, City of LaGrange roadway, and as such, you'll coordinate with the city for an encroachment permit as necessary. They may just need to reissue for the current use. I'm sorry. Let me reread that. Because it's existing, it's not required. Sorry, Alex. Let's see. The other items on here are really more specific to that more complete construction plan review and wouldn't be addressed at TRC, so I'm not going to get into those at this time. Those were the typical TRC stage review plans.
I don't have any comments.
So we, of course, served the old Ponderosa. Do you know if the elevation is changing any? Are you coming up or going down any on elevation? And the reason I ask that is because the sewer there, if you go down much, is going to be pretty flat, if not flat. So we probably need to really look at that so that we don't get into a situation where you're not able to get your water out.
Yeah, we're well aware of that.
Okay.
And one of the things that we want to do is get on site and
Yes, if you'll just
recover
contact
the-
my office, we'll get some guys out there too
Perfect.
on the main and help do that process.
Very good.
Hi. Of course, it's in LaGrange Fire Protection District. Similar question and what Scott said about elevation changes there. There is the existing hydrant out front there, and it's low now. I need to get that up, so if you're planning any kind of, site changes there, that thing needs to get.
Okay, are you talking about out on 53?
Yeah. Well, it's in the rocks.
Okay.
Out there.
Yeah, so
Is that
currently we don't have any plans to modify that portion of the site. In fact, we're closing the access coming in that you would come in and go to Wendy's.
Yeah.
So we're closing that access. So all of our access will come off of Moody Lane.
Okay.
And the grading that will take place will be on our site, not in the right of way.
Well, no, we'd have to skull drag it to that hydrant.
That's probably going to limit the fire department's access to the existing hydrant by taking that entrance out.
Under the old structure that was there with Ponderosa, we had, parking lot going all the way, pretty much right out there. And that's the hydrant that we would use to provide protection for that. If I remember correctly, the closest other hydrant there is going to be across New Moody then.
Right, unless we install another hydrant on the property, because that water main comes all the way along the property line and then turns toward Moody.
Okay.
So we might be beneficial to just add a hydrant in there.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to discuss this with you
Yes, sir.
outside of this meeting if we can. Thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that would like to speak on this project?
Ryan, I'd like to clarify real quick. I had an oops moment talking about that permit, and just for anyone who watches this in the future and for our minutes, this has access through an easement, and that's why the permit from the city is not required.
Okay. Thank you. Nobody? All right. That concludes that one. We'll go to our last case. That is TRC 24-007 for LaGrange C-Store at 800 West Jefferson Street in LaGrange.
Hello, I'm Josh Cecil, 214 Josh Cecil, 214 Fairway West, Nicholasville, Kentucky, 40356. We're proposing to do a redevelopment of the old McAllister Auto Body Shop and change it to a convenience gas station store. And that's really about it. Take your comments. Thank you.
All right. So this is my case, so I'll start with planning and development comments. And I do have copies of both the letters for you, just like all the other cases. So the first one is note the height of the proposed building in the proposed development information section. I believe right now it's just got an X.
So it is 20 feet.
Okay, yeah, so just on your next set of plans, make sure you include that. Include all bearings and dimensions for all property boundary lines. Per section 250-100 of our zoning regulations, fuel pumps, retail storage tanks, and all necessary dispensing apparatus shall be located at least 15 feet from the rights-of-way or property lines. It appears the canopy roof, so that's part of that whole fuel dispensing apparatus structure that is permanently affixed to the ground, is within that 15-foot area along Franklin Avenue. So please adjust, or we'll look at doing, a waiver for that in addition to the other waivers that are being requested. Note driveway and entrance widths and ensure they comply with section 250-100 as well. That is specific to the fuel sale stations and that they fall within that 24 to 36 foot width parameters on those entrances. Adjoining property owner, a couple of notices on the adjoining property owners. It looks like the ones to the west, you have them labeled as anchor condominium. Those are shown on the PVA as all being individually owned units with names. So just accurately change those. And then it looks like the adjoining property owner to the northwest, labeled as Robert Tice, is listed by the PVA as LAT LLC, and that's got a reference of deed book 1109, page 317, so make that change as well. And the last couple ones, a landscape and lighting plan will need to be submitted and approved prior to any building permit approval, and that'll come through our office. I know we don't deal with a whole lot from you, so those two plans will come directly to me, the landscape and lighting, when you put in the rest of the plans with engineering and your building permits, but those will go directly to us. And then a sign permit will also be required for any signage, and that'll go through the city of LaGrange since they are within the city limits. And that is all I have.
All right, from Oldham County Engineering, this appears to be less than an acre of disturbance. As such, you wouldn't be required to get the KYR 10 or stormwater quality management and erosion control permit, but you will provide plans to our office for review as a commercial nature project. For the access on 146, you'd be required to get an entrance or an encroachment permit from the state. That'll have to be approved by them and would meet all their requirements for head walls, culverts, drainage, pavement width. For the Franklin entrance, that's a City of LaGrange right away, so that would require encroachment permit from the City of LaGrange. I looked at the turning movements that were provided in the packet, and while typically we ask that the emergency vehicles, garbage trucks, any delivery trucks you have can negotiate the site, it looked like the fire truck doesn't make it. It looks like the swept path encroaches on the parking spaces in the front, and then also may leave the Franklin Avenue edge of pavement. So check into that. Include a proposed pavement detail on your full plan set. Verify where curbs are to be placed. It looks like there are a couple sections of curbs missing. Those are required in accordance with the subdivision regulations. Based on the square footage of the building and ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers calculations, this would appear to generate 282.46 PM peak hours trips with an ADT of 7,139 trips on 146. This would meet the criteria for a traffic impact study. So you'll need to provide that, and the scoping for that impact study, since you are encroaching on a state right-of-way, needs to be coordinated with Jason Richardson in their permits office also.
I don't have any comments.
It already has an existing address that you're going to reuse. Yep.
So as far as water and sewer service, there's existing service there, so just coordinate with our office on when you get ready for that, and we will get that taken care of.
Okay, I'm assuming with any oil water separator, you'll review that type of stuff.
Yeah, so
if it's
it has a garage?
No. No
Okay.
garage. So
Okay.
it would just be for food
Just for- okay.
service.
Yeah, so there'll be a specification for that.
Okay.
Yep.
Fire department has no comments. We have water nearby, hydrants nearby. I'll get with the property owner when construction begins about other things.
Okay. With Mr. Silman's comment about the swept path, I used the largest vehicle for emergency vehicle. Do you have a model number that we can model for your
The
largest?
largest one, I don't have it off the top of my head.
I can coordinate with you on that.
Get it to you, yes.
The one I used is the Super Max, where it's the
Aerial?
aerial
Okay.
apparatus, the
Right.
biggest you can use.
I can get you the model and all that of it, yes, sir.
And Mr. Treese mentioned food service. Our health department representative isn't here, but he would normally make a comment, just get with the health department, I mean,
Okay.
food service preparation and all that.
Perfect.
Yeah, there will be fog on that as well, on that portion. Yep.
With that, is there anybody here that would like to ask questions of the applicant? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Wayne Tice, and I live at 5103 Glen Cove Road. I'm representing the 103 Anchor Avenue property, which has just been changed to LAT LLC. One of the questions I got in listening is this meet the planning and zoning so that this can, it doesn't, we're asking for no zoning changes.
That's correct. The property is zoned C3 already.
All right.
So they aren't changing the zoning.
All right. And by the paper I picked up the other day, it abuts R2 all the way around. So I read that correctly.
R2A.
R2A, excuse me.
R2A.
Yeah. And the other question, you said waivers, and were you talking about variances? Is that the same, just a different word for the same deal?
So they'll be asking for several waivers. One is on the impervious surface. They'll be asking for one on the landscape buffer requirement between that and those residential properties. And then the other one we talked about today was with the fuel canopy being within that area, which is similar to, we had another gas station just come through within the last 4 or 5 months. They had to ask for the same waiver along that.
That's a variance, because variances are dimensional and waivers are requirements in the regulations. They essentially mean the same thing in terms of a procedure.
Just whatever you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yeah.
Now, so since it's zone appropriately, would this be going to the Oldham County Variance Board, or will this be going to a LaGrange Board?
So this will go to the Oldham County Planning Commission because it does generate enough trips that it will have to go for the Planning Commission for further approval. And then if it's a variance, they can hear the variance with the development plan, or will that have to go to the LaGrange?
I think the time they can hear variances are with subdivisions and zone changes. Otherwise, it would have to go to the LaGrange Board.
Yeah. So the variance would then have to go to LaGrange Board of Adjustments.
So in other words, we'll be going to planning and zoning first, and then depending if it moves from there, it'll be going to the LaGrange Variance Board.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
So the
got that.
waivers that they're currently asking for, those would also be heard by the Planning Commission. So they would hear the waiver request that they've got listed on their plans in addition to their site plan. And then if that passes, they would go to the LaGrange Board of Adjustments for the variance of that fuel canopy.
Got it. And then you'll notify me on all of these
Yes,
these
sir.
types. The one question I've got is for parking spaces. And I was reading on this that it says that parking spaces you can use pump spaces as parking spaces. Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, simply because some people are only pulling in for gasoline, some are pulling in for gasoline and convenient, and some are just going for convenient. So there's a requirement, or in our regulations, we've always had that located at the pumps is part of the parking requirements.
Okay. If that's normal, I'm okay. I just didn't know that was normal.
Mhm.
Thank you. And then I'll be hearing something from everybody. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you. Is there anyone else that would care to speak? And I will just say, I did receive one letter from another adjoining property owner. I'll forward that to you all just so you have that on record. And then I'll also put one in the record as well. Another thing I did want to note is just to make sure for the Planning Commission hearing, you all do have legal counsel. They do have to be present for the Planning Commission hearing as well. And then, as always, if you were notified of this as an adjoining property owner, you'll be notified if they go forward with any other hearings. So I believe that concludes all of our cases. It's 2:25, and we'll call the meeting adjourned.